Verballers, listen. It is time. It is time to visit New Mexico. Check out one of their funky small towns like Pie Town, or stop in Albuquerque as you road trip it down Route 66. Enjoy starry night skies, delicious cuisine, unique architecture, and maybe the New Mexico Bowl. Check it out. Learn more and plan your trip at newmexico.org/solid. New Mexico. True.
Welcome to the Solid Verbal.
The Solid Verbal.
Come after me! I'm a man! I'm 40!
I've heard so many players say, well, I want to be happy. You want to be happy for a day? Eat a steak.
It's that woo woo.
And now, Dan and Ty.
Welcome back to the Solid Verbal, boys and girls. My name is Ty Hildenbrand. Joining me, as always, over there in New York City, my man, Dan Rubenstein. Sir, how are you?
Extra hour of sleep, Ty. I am zooming. I've had 3 cups of tea, a cup of coffee. I am hydrated, and I am ready to talk about my favorite week of the season. How could I be anything less than perfect?
Dan, did you sow your oats on Saturday?
Ty, when do I not sow these oats? These big, stanky one. Okay. I did, Ty. I really went for it. I ate well. I had a great day with cool company watching these games, and I really felt it pulsing through me for sure.
Who was your cool company?
Richard Johnson, our pal Richard.
Okay.
My wife,
yeah,
Jody with an I, and my in-laws.
Okay.
And so I had a great turkey sandwich with some coleslaw for lunch. And then for dinner, we really went for it with some pizza at a local place, a coal oven place.
Oh, nice. Nice. You know how I feel about that. Yeah.
Ordered that extra side of marinara because I'm not an amateur pizza eater, Ty, and I hope nobody listening is. So I really feel like I went for it with my oats.
How's Richard Johnson right now feeling about Felipe Franks? Just
dismissive.
Yeah.
Not particularly good. But that game was not worthy because of the slate we had yesterday. That game was not worthy of a TV because of the pretty big action across college football. All respect to Florida and Mizzou football. So he was just watching it on a laptop. He didn't want to inflict Florida's offense upon some pretty good people, I would say.
He is courteous and a true Southern gentleman.
That's
to say
true.
the least. So,
yeah.
Okay, we labeled it Sow Your Oats Saturday because week 10 was loaded. Forbear a ton of big, high-profile matchups that we previewed on Wednesday. In hindsight, I feel like Toilet Snake Saturday may have been a better fit because there were a lot of teams where, looking down, you see something scary down there before you realize, hey, I can just flush it all down and it'll be fine.
Out of nowhere, there's that rattler. Snake in the Toilet Saturday, I stand by as being a very good option for week 10, but it's probably more applicable to that week 5 where it looks like there are no good games, and that's the week where, 4, 5, 6 teams jump up and take down a ranked team. So we'll save that for 2019.
We'll save that for 2019. You live and learn. Week 11, getting a little bit bigger in the window, which we'll discuss here as we move through the recap for week 10. But before we do, let's start off where we start off every Sunday morning. Here are your Week 10 reverbs. Have a listen.
I got to say that I question Dana Holgerson's judgment. Advisor is definitely not his best option.
Hey, this is Red in Texas. Dan, Ty, it's Adam from Pittsburgh.
Dan, Ty, Taylor, this is Nathan from Indiana.
This is Chris from Iowa.
Hey guys, we're over here celebrating after Alabama spent the better part of 4 hours getting freaky on LSU on Sow Your Oats Saturday. 29-0. The dynasty continues.
Every year I hear about how great the Alabama-LSU rivalry is. Yet every year I see Alabama win by 3 touchdowns or so.
Just wanted to let you guys know, I turned my crock pot on at about 8 o'clock, and now it's about 11:30, and I got a nice big pot of Tiger gumbo. It's delicious. Roll Tide, baby.
Just want to say that seeing Tua sprint past the LSU defense for a 44-yard touchdown was probably one of my favorites moments of the year, even on that bum knee.
Who knew that Drew Lock could bring his howitzer on his right arm across state lines?
Hey guys, it's about 12:30 a.m. in Oxford, Mississippi. We got done playing football about 8 hours ago. We're just getting done drinking.
Can you please tell that Kentucky safety to go pick his ankles up? Because DeAndre Swift is a dude!
What time is it?
It's time to drink some beer!
You know why?
Because of Billy Greer!
If it's 15 yards to give up the horns down, then I guess WVU is about to give up 40 acres. Cheers, beers, Mountaineers.
You smell that? I smell a crockpot coming. Welcome to the revenge tour, Penn State.
When you said that Penn State was good enough to lose or defeat anyone by 7 points, did you actually mean 35?
Ty, what's your favorite Penn State pass for a touchdown today? Because I've got mine. Go Blue!
I just want to thank my Buckeyes for making their win over Nebraska as excruciating as possible.
Nebraska forced Ohio State to punt, and that's all I wanted today.
Is it the Ohio State defense the cure for the common offense?
After Michigan State's win over Maryland today, we are now 2-0 in the Pariah Cup with a chance to clinch against Ohio State next week.
Hit the strobe lights. Go Boilers. Sweet sweater vest, Kirk.
Last week's bye could not have come at a better time for the Rutgers Scarlet. Oh, never mind.
Hello from Tokyo. Just wanted to say that in Japan, Pac-12 after dark is actually Pac-12 after lunch.
Just wanted to say thank you to Chip Kelly for a great return trip to Autzen, and thank you so much for muffing one last punt for old time's sake.
I would like to petition the NCAA on behalf of Kyle Whittingham to end the college football season on October 31st.
It's a good thing we have so many engineering schools in the ACC Coastal, because there's a good shot that somebody's going to have to figure out what the rules are for a 5-way tiebreaker.
Don't look now. Secretly Decent Pitt is back. The drive for the Coastal is on. Who down? Hail to Pitt.
It was a little iffy at first, but Dino Babers in Syracuse lived up to Dan's billing of Syracuse Saturday with the big comeback win.
Woo! I think Clemson's going to jail for desecrating a corpse.
Also, I think I saw Bobby Petrino leaving the stadium on a Harley. I don't know what that was about.
It sure is funny that Northwestern was done in by a book. Go Irish.
Is it an issue that I have to cheer on my 9-0 Irish as if they were 0-9?
Another year, another Army win over Air Force. Better luck next year, little brother.
LSU, Kentucky, Penn State, Florida, Utah, Iowa, Texas, Houston, and Texas A&M. Welcome to Sayonara Saturday.
Alrighty, Dan, there you go. Spirited as ever. Big thanks to our main man Taylor down there in DC, who always throws those together for us every Sunday morning, bright and early. 408-VERBAL-1. Again, is the phone number for next week. If you want to call in, give us your stream of consciousness response to what happens in Week 11, the currently unnamed Week 11, which we'll work up to on Wednesday. First and foremost, don't forget to tell all your friends about the show. We are the Solid Verbal. You could find us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and on Reddit at reddit.com/r/solidverbal. Get in on the newsletter, which you could find at solidverbal.com, because we got new shirts coming out in the very short term.
Mm-hmm.
All that out of the way, Dan, where should we start with our breakdown of Week 10?
Colgate 38. Fordham 0.
Woo!
Let's start out with the game of the century, of the millennium, of the night.
The game of the century, of the millennium, of the night, I suppose, would be Alabama LSU. After the college football playoff rankings were announced for the first time this season last week, Alabama was 1, LSU was 3. This was a night game. It was played in Baton Rouge. Clearly, there is some history in this matchup, with it being very close, very meaningful. This one was meaningful, though not very close in the end. Your final score, a shutout here. Alabama wins 29-0 over the Bayou Bengals. They've now beaten LSU 8 straight times, which, you know, I was thinking about it. It sounds like a lot, but really in the context of this Nick Saban dynasty, we almost sort of gloss over it at this point, that Alabama would beat anybody that many consecutive times. With the win, Alabama clinches the SEC West. Mm-hmm. The story here really, I guess a lot of what we've seen throughout the course of this season for Alabama. They outgain LSU 576-196. They hold LSU to 12 yards rushing. They had 5 sacks. They had a pick. Alabama is stupid good at this point. And after a week where we heard some chatter about, who has Alabama really played so far? This was a statement victory for them on Statement Saturday, if you will.
You might be able to still say that.
Right, that's right.
After what LSU's offense did or really didn't do against Alabama. And mercifully, it was pretty clear that LSU was not going to do much on offense. There was no real hope in this game. And now LSU has scored precisely 1 touchdown in their last 3 meetings against Alabama. So that's the Ed Orgeron era, which I think is still a success, but that is me from the outside saying that. And, when you measure yourself against Alabama talent-wise and in your division and overall program health-wise, and you don't score a touchdown in 3 years, or you scored a touchdown in 3 years, it's worrisome. And LSU's season has still been pretty good. Alabama is excellent. And there was some worry, it felt like a month ago, Alabama's giving up more yards per carry than they ever. Alabama's fine. Alabama is absolutely fine. Tua looked a little bit shaky health-wise early on, but made throws. The incredible throw, the touchdown pass to Irv Smith was great. Jerry Jeudy is just, I don't know if you have the sound ready to go, but the amount of body control and acceleration and deceleration he has feels unique to him and him alone.
There you go, sir. A little late on the draw there.
I don't know, you're good. He is incredible, and it's lost because everything about Alabama at a certain point. Quinnen Williams on the defensive line. I don't know if you saw his double swim sack.
Oh, sick.
And we will, obviously, he is a dude amongst dudes as well. There's not much to say about Alabama, just that they are excellent. And to compete with them, and yes, they've given up yardage, they've given up points this year, didn't do it on their biggest stage of the season, so that's a pretty good sign. But to compete with Alabama, you have to stretch out their defense, you have to become a threat downfield, you have to have the talent at receiver to make Alabama think twice about what they're doing on defense. We've seen this over these past few years. It's true of Alabama, it's true of everybody, but LSU did not, and has not had that for a long time. And watching Joe Burrow struggle to look, 8 yards downfield, let alone 17, 29 yards downfield was a rough undertaking for both LSU and for anybody who watched this game. Alabama is the clear class of college football. That's it.
That really is it. The other thing that came to mind in watching this last night was Alabama is so balanced on offense. 295 passing, 281 rushing. I couldn't help but wonder if this was the ultimate Jay Paterno fever dream for the old spread HD 10 years ago. If I had tweaked it a little bit, maybe we could have done that. But Bama is so complete. They were too much up front for LSU. They close out their season now with Mississippi State next week.
That's a tough defense.
It's a tough defense. I don't know if they have the complete package like you just described.
Nope.
To take down Alabama.
Nope.
But good defense, sure. Mississippi State, the Citadel, and then the Iron Bowl against Auburn. We'll talk about Auburn a little later. Auburn's not there this year. They're just not. And all of those games are at home, which bodes incredibly well for Alabama. The big matchup probably will be against Georgia in the SEC championship game. Georgia, by the way, clinched their side of the SEC with a 34-17 win over the Kentucky Wildcats. Remember what I said on Wednesday about Kentucky? Do you remember Wednesday?
I always remember everything you say. What did you say?
I said they want to run the ball and they want to hold you under 20 points.
Yep.
What if I told you they weren't able to do either in this game, Dan?
I wouldn't be totally shocked, but I was shocked that Kentucky came out, and this isn't really that fair. I was shocked that Georgia was able to have the early success that they did. Not because I thought anything less of Georgia, but just because I thought there would be a good amount of energy with that Kentucky defense. But it turns out alley-oops are very important. And when Kentucky's offense was not giving the defense, their own defense, anything, that's what can generally happen. And, a good defense turned into a leaky one pretty quickly.
Benny Snell did get to 73 yards, but it took him 20 carries to get there. I don't know how many of the post-game quotes you read, but Jonathan Ledbetter, the end for Georgia, seems like he took it personally when knuckleheads like me thought that Kentucky could run against them. He felt disrespected. Everyone feels disrespected, right? But the Georgia defense apparently did too.
teams could run on Georgia this year, so that's not totally unexpected. But good for the Dogs to just go with what was working, and what was working was DeAndre Swift and a lot of DeAndre Swift, along with Elijah Holyfield. But yeah, they did not try to do too much. Kentucky made some noise late, and it was nice to see Terry Wilson rise to the occasion somewhat in leading them back to at least a couple score game. He was relatively efficient, but an ugly offensive performance from Kentucky and a thorough offensive performance from Georgia.
Georgia will close out its season with Auburn, UMass, and Georgia Tech, and then, of course, Alabama in the SEC title game. So we'll clearly be talking more about the Bulldogs here over the next 4 weeks of the season, but
yeah, nice to have everything clinched.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's go to Big Ten country.
Yeah, a huge upset here.
Woo! Okay.
You know what I'm talking about?
Are you talking about Purdue over Iowa, or are you talking about Illinois over Minnesota?
Nope, neither one of those things. Penn State scoring?
Well, look, hey.
Enormous upset.
Like I've been saying all year, Penn State is within 7 touchdowns of any good team in the country, Dan.
Yeah, you hit it right on the head with that.
Wow, what a beatdown here. 42-7, your final score. Michigan clearly out for blood. It seemed as if they wanted to run it up. They tried their best to run it up. If not for Penn State scoring within the last 2 minutes of the game, this would have been a shutout.
Oh, yeah, it was. I mean, this was a shutout. It was a front door shutout, whatever we want to call it. And one of the tells, and this has been pretty true all season long, if Michigan's running the ball early on, if they're able to gain yardage, not necessarily huge yardage, but if they're churning out 5, 6, 7 yards a run,
yeah,
it feels like the game is over. When you give that Michigan defense time to rest and collect itself and cycle in multiple players at different positions, they start getting antsy and confident in a good way.
Yeah.
This Michigan team is pretty much impossible to get one over on because they got after Trace McSorley. They completely silenced Penn State on the ground. And that's the other thing. If Penn State's not getting anything on the ground,
forget it.
It's really fun to watch when Trace McSorley is like the do-everything guy like he was against Ohio State. It's not a great recipe for competing with top teams, though. And it was just Michigan in the backfield. Michigan abused Penn State up front.
They killed him. They killed him. And like you said, 259 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground for Michigan. They are first and foremost a rushing team.
Yes.
It does seem as if that offense has now congealed around that just general style, and Shea Patterson has been more comfortable pretty much every week after that Notre Dame game. He has gotten way more comfortable in this offense. For Michigan's offense to hand that over to the defense, it's just an incredible asset. An incredible asset. They force 3 turnovers. They hold Penn State, like you said, to just 68 rushing yards and under 200 yards passing, obviously only 7 points. Regarding Penn State, though,
yeah,
Penn State's just an interesting case that I want people to follow now over the last month of the season. They're 6-3. The results this season, maybe not entirely unexpected. And there is a lot of frustration building among the fan base on both a micro and macro level around James Franklin. Specifically with this season, the offense around Trace McSorley has not developed. It just hasn't developed. And I think by now we had hoped that there would be more development in the wide receiver core. That's just not there. And they've overcompensated now by essentially running Trace McSorley into the ground, which manifests with him basically playing hurt. He's been hurt the last
and getting benched.
And getting benched, but he's basically hurt at this point.
Right.
And so I don't know if that means that in the short term we're going to see more of Tommy Stevens or what. We saw too much of Tommy Stevens yesterday with that horrible interception, but we may see more of him moving forward just because Trace is hurt. And they got to give him a chance to heal. It's not fair to him. On a more macro level, Dan, my sense among, again, people that I talk to in the fan base is that James Franklin has hit his ceiling, that he is a recruiter, but not a steady hand when it comes to key game situations, when it comes to big game situations. I'm very curious to see how that plays itself out over the next month, the next couple months of the season. There's already some activity on Twitter about, well, maybe James Franklin would be wise to look elsewhere or see what his options are in the offseason. That, for as crazy as that might seem to some, given how close Penn State was last year, the year before, to reaching the college football playoff. It does not at all seem crazy to me if James Franklin's able to read the tea leaves, know that he's losing his starting quarterback next year, and maybe feel like he might be on the precipice of his stock going down. Just saying, just throwing it out there. I am not privy to anything,
right?
But I can feel that building, not just as a Penn State alum, but as someone who lives in the great state of Pennsylvania. It's very real and it's very palpable.
Yeah, this should be a competitive Penn State team. Even, losing to Ohio State, losing to Michigan, even losing to Michigan State. These things are understandable if it comes down to the final possession, but the way in which they lost to Michigan with, yes, a beat-up Trace McSorley, but we're talking about an experienced running back with talent. We're talking about a third-year starter at quarterback, and they have Ricky Slade, number 1 running back in the country as a recruit, behind Miles Sanders, a receiving core that has a good amount of returning talent and good new talent in KJ Hamler. Defensively, they've recruited quite well, and they have foundational pieces there. Michigan trounced Penn State.
They killed them.
They, from the get-go, trounced Penn State, and I don't want to sort of settle on negativity with Penn State, so I'm just going to focus on Michigan here. It was Chase Winovich. It was Josh Uche. It was Khalil Hudson. It was, they had the pick 6. That was a major, not major at that point, but Devin Bush was all over the place. This Michigan defense is as good, if not better, than any defense in the country. Maybe not Alabama, but I don't even compare teams at this point to Alabama. And what's nice about Michigan as it relates to every, situation conference-wise across the country, I love a good collision course, Ty. And this Michigan-Ohio State matchup in Columbus in a couple weeks, 3 weeks, looks wonderful.
It looks
like it's going to be all sorts of entertaining. But you're right about Penn State, and I don't know if it's coordinator decisions that, James Franklin has sort of hired within these past couple years and replacing guys, and it's worked out somewhat. I don't know who Penn State would hire at this point.
Well, we could talk about that later.
Yeah, the takeaway is, hail, hail. It was a Michigan night.
Absolutely. Congratulations to Michigan.
Dylan McCaffrey, by the way,
broke his
collarbone.
Staying in the Big Ten, talk about the sum of all fears on Saturday. Notre Dame fumbling on its very first drive was really, for me, the equivalent of like your phone going crazy when there's a severe weather statement that everyone needs you to know about. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
31-21, your final score. Notre Dame wins on the road. I called this one back in July. It was always going to be a tricky spot. You could call it a sloppy win. You could say it was not crisp. You could just shrug. I don't know how you want to respond to this one, but really the tale of two halves if you watched. In the first half, Notre Dame just couldn't establish any rhythm. It was tied 7-7 at half. In the second half, Notre Dame comes out. They go touchdown, field goal on their first 3 drives to take more of a commanding lead with 24-7. But Northwestern is plucky. I've been saying they're plucky. They've got a pluckiness quotient to them. They answer with a quick touchdown on the next drive. They force a punt, which they block. They work in another short field for a touchdown. They make it 24-21, 7 minutes left. And that's when I thought Notre Dame really proved its mettle. That's when I thought, if you were going to take anything away from this game, the last 7 minutes of the fourth quarter, it showed some maturation for this Notre Dame offense. Brian Kelly, Chip Long, they don't panic. Ian Book doesn't panic. They answer with a 10-play, 89-yard drive that eats up 4 minutes and change from that fourth quarter clock. It culminates with a long touchdown run from Ian Book, a great play call. That gives Notre Dame enough separation to win this one, but definitely tough sledding for a while in Evanston.
Ian Book, full on good? ?
He's good. He's poised. He's got a poise to him that Brandon Wimbush did not have. He's got a poise to him in big game situations and a confidence now in his receiving core that's taken a little while to fully develop, but it is there. It is there. It's real. And you can feel confident in watching a Notre Dame game with the game on the line late that Ian Book isn't going to freak out and make a bad decision. He's been very good in those situations this year.
Yeah, and Northwestern forced Ian Book to make plays. They weren't giving anything to Notre Dame on the ground, to their credit. Dexter Williams and Jafar Armstrong really didn't control this game. The running game did not really establish much for the Irish against what is a good Northwestern defense, and Ian Book won the game. And he won it with his feet, and he won it with his arm, and you're right about the poise. And the combination of a poised quarterback who doesn't make a lot of mistakes and a good defense, and I thought they got run on a little bit, and they sort of had some mental lapses a little bit, but for the most part, that is a winning combination. Notre Dame should make the playoff. Everything is pointing to Notre Dame in the playoff, and it's easy to say, so-and-so team controls the destiny, whatever. Notre Dame is actually in the position to do that. They don't have a conference championship game. The teams remaining are all beatable. It's just a matter of, can this formula repeat itself week over week with Northwestern? And it's strange to say because we're talking about the Big Ten West leader in Northwestern driver's seat. It's just taking care of business now for Notre Dame. That's all it is.
Okay. Let's go to the Big 12. A lot of points in the Big 12, Dan.
Shocker,
I know. Let's start with the earlier game in Austin. West Virginia 42, Texas 41. Will Grier throws a 33-yard touchdown pass with just 16 seconds left on the clock.
Just a dime, not just a touchdown pass. Just
a beautiful pass. Got the toe tap in the back of the end zone. Yeah, a beauty. The score is 41-40 in favor of Texas.
Yes.
Dana Holgerson, the riverboat gambler, has a decision.
Yeah.
You can kick it and tie it, or you can go for 2 in the win. Dan, what did riverboat gambler Dana Holgerson elect to do?
He was Pedro Serrano and went with his marbles and went for it like 3 different times, but there were timeouts and a timeout right before a caught slant for the win, before eventually calling what looked like a draw that was improvised to the outside when it wasn't there inside by Will Grier for the win, followed by Ty, horns down.
Oh, yeah.
Which, by the way, you can taunt anybody you want in college football with an innocent hand gesture, no middle fingers or something, but you do a horns down and Big 12 refs turn into, oh no, oh no, horns down. Oh no, we can't have that. Oh no. And they did it a couple different times.
Since when do refs sound like teenage girls?
I don't know, but the calls on the horns down were kind of funny. West Virginia was great. They ran the ball really well with Petaway, and no surprise that the receivers showed out. I thought also it's worth noting Texas's defense has taken a few steps back. They're beat up for sure, but up front in the secondary, they gave up a lot, and Sam Ehlinger did basically everything within his power to win this game.
Yeah.
I don't know the last time he threw a pick, but we need to start talking about Sam Ehlinger as probably one of the best 5 or 6 quarterbacks in the country. He's just so stupid good. He's so just a playmaker.
He really is. I texted you at one point about that Texas pass defense. It looked like they were scrimmaging out there.
Yeah, it's rough.
And to be fair, West Virginia wasn't much better. They may actually have been worse.
No.
So pretty much a good day for anything on offense. Almost 1,100 total yards in this game. But West Virginia takes their chances. They end up winning here 42-41 in Austin. A nice win for them. They've got TCU at Oklahoma State and then back home against Oklahoma to close out the year. Not crazy to me that they could win all 3 of those games. I don't know if I expect it, but they're very good on offense.
What would you say West Virginia and Oklahoma are on right now?
Are on?
Yeah. Would you say they're on a collision course?
Yeah, collision course Saturday.
Dude, come on. I was looking at all the divisional matchups across college football. Utah State, Fresno State, NIU, Buffalo. We have so many. Houston, UCF, maybe even after UCF or after Houston lost. We've got so many collision courses.
Moving on. Speaking of that collision course,
yeah.
Oklahoma 51, Texas Tech 46, as our friend David Hale put it in his wonderful ESPN.com summary this morning. Oklahoma, if we wanted to play defense, we wouldn't be in the Big 12. Which I think sums it up quite nicely. So first and foremost, Some scary news in this one. Our boy, British comedy legend Alan Bowman, appears to have re-injured that partially collapsed lung. He was in the hospital for observation.
Yeah.
He did play in this game, though not in the second half. When he was in, he was virtually unstoppable. 21 of 26, 227, 2 touchdowns before he left and gave way to Jet Duffy, who came in and was also somewhat unstoppable, not to the same degree. But Oklahoma, if you were paying attention to this one, did go down early. They were down 14-0, then 31-28 at half. This game could have very easily gotten away from them. So credit to the Sooners for rising to the occasion late.
And yes, it was on Kyler Murray. I mean, somewhat early on, throwing a couple of picks I think it was both in the first quarter. But Oklahoma calms down. They turned Lee Morris, made some plays outside for them, and it was very cool to see. And by cool, I mean impressive that Oklahoma just has a nonstop arsenal of running backs these past few years to turn to. Rodney Anderson goes down, and then all of a sudden, Kennedy Brooks, Trey Sermon. Yeah. It's just over and over again. It happens, even going back, Joe Mixon, Samaje Perine. So Oklahoma with a not so secret run of backs in the backfield getting it done. And that's really what they leaned on. I know Kyler Murray eventually made a number of really impressive plays, but for Oklahoma to look as balanced as they did, that's the real Jay Paterno spread HD tie. That's the one.
What happens if, hypothetically, this isn't like a real thing, but what happens if a team like Oklahoma plays Michigan? Who wins that game?
Sure. Probably Michigan.
Yeah.
Because that seems like the kind of game that it's just styles make fights. And if Oklahoma's defense can't get off the field, and we've seen that become a little bit more meaningful, especially if it's on a neutral field. Oklahoma away from Norman has been pretty shaky, going to Ames, going to Dallas to play Texas, and, needing basically every minute of the game. A really nice 2-point conversion return for 2 by Oklahoma there, giving themselves some wiggle room. But at this point, I think if Shea Patterson were able to have some time and space to throw, they would run on Oklahoma, and Michigan would get enough stops that I would probably take them by a touchdown there.
And Texas Tech just needs to offer Dave Aranda like $10 million.
It's tough, man.
Get it done.
I think there's something about this is a conversation probably for somebody like Bud Elliott, but like why teams in Texas, whatever, if it's kids not being able to develop on the defensive side of the ball, or it's just putting so many of the best athletes on offense that TCU's done an okay job throughout the years, but even they've given up a lot. Baylor on defense has been leaky. And it's just a philosophy thing, probably. Who knows?
All right. Well, finally, while most of you East Coast pansies were asleep.
Mm-hmm. Oh, no.
The real defense is played out in the Pac-12. We know that by now. Washington State 19, Cal 13.
Yep.
This one was 13 all until the last 30 seconds of the game. That's when Gardner Minshew connected with Aesop Winston for a 10-yard touchdown pass. Wazoo missed on the extra point try to give them a share of that 19-point title. They share it with UConn this week.
I don't know how much there is to take away from this game. Wazoo has been bad in second halves this year.
Right.
And they survive, which, listen, win your clunkers. That is an unofficial motto of this show. Win your clunkers. That counts. Cal's defense is great. Did you see the Washington double fumble out of the end, or the Wazoo double fumble pick 6 to be out of the end zone touchback?
That's like a Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 combo play right there.
And they survived. It was okay. Weird day in the Pac-12. The Pac-12 is basically, and I'm sure we'll get to it, but it is a demolition. It's a West Coast demolition derby, and that means they're crashing Priuses and Nissan Leaves into each other, and that's what we have. It's entertainment.
Well, run me through the Pac-12. Let's go into the Pac-12. We got most of the headliners out of the way.
Yeah.
Arizona State beats Utah, and we've talked about it being the start of November for everyone else, but the start of November for Utah. And sure enough, down go the Utes. Also, down goes Tyler Huntley.
Yeah,
with a broken collarbone, which is a bit upsetting.
Mm-hmm.
The injury is significant for Utah because they've been so good on offense, but I don't think we can gloss over what ASU did to Utah's defense in this game, Dan.
Yeah, ASU is very quietly in a driver's seat-ish position. They're in the front seat. They're not in the driver's seat. Nobody's there yet in the Pac-12 South. But even with a healthy Tyler Huntley, this Utah team looked flat, especially on defense. And I think it's a credit to Arizona State and how their own offense has evolved over the course of the season, which, hasn't always been impressive, but they're taking advantage of N'Keal Harry and the gravity that he brings to that offense, just the attention that defenses have to pay to him. And that has helped with the development of Benjamin. I thought ASU's offensive line did a really nice job against Utah's front. They really had no answer for Benjamin. So ASU, coming up with big plays on both sides of the ball. Utah, it was just, you can't blame it on Tyler Huntley's injury fully, and it's a bummer to see, but there is something about Utah's NO-vembers recently where they do take that dip, and I think the story is much more Arizona State here and just how well they performed at home.
Take me around the rest of the Pac-12, because we had wins by USC, Washington close over Stanford, though they were up pretty big in that one. We had the reunion of Chip Kelly and Oregon. Yep. Oregon wins by 21. And then we had the game earlier in the week with Arizona edging out Colorado.
Yeah, I'll start there. Khalil Tate looks really good. As he's getting healthier, Arizona is, shocker, looking better and better. And playing that game in Tucson, staying at home, has helped the Wildcats. J.J. Taylor is, I think, pretty quietly one of the better running backs in the country. When he can stay healthy, because he is kind of small, his first step is just electric. And Colorado is pretty good. And they just weren't good enough at Arizona, an improving Arizona team, which is good to see. I like good amounts of quality in a conference, and we're inching towards that in the Pac-12. They just don't have any sort of elite teams right now, to me. And that's an apology to Washington State, but I would like to see more from them. Elsewhere, I would say Washington did a pretty good job against Stanford, let them come back a little bit, but Stanford was just atrocious in the first half. Too many mistakes from KJ Costello. Good to see USC get things going on the ground where they had been particularly bad. So they make the switch where Clay Helton is now calling plays, and they fire Neil Callaway, their offensive line coach. And yes, it's Oregon State, but this is a USC team who, across the board, has had bouts of just struggling on offense. JT Daniels comes back, is fine, nothing particularly special. They get out early, but let Oregon State back in the game before closing them out late. So that was good to see from USC. The Washington defense, once again, I mentioned Stanford struggling, but the Washington defense played, for the most part, pretty well. And it was nice to see Myles Gaskin come back and have a nice day against the Stanford defense. It's been okay at times. The Oregon-UCLA score is kind of deceiving, I would say, would be the nicest word. I can surmise for what happened in that game. Oregon got 21 points off of a 6-yard touchdown drive after a fumble recovery. A fake field goal set them up to score from the 1, I believe. And UCLA also had a muffed punt, and that drive started the 11. So Oregon's offense is still below average.
Okay.
So UCLA's defense is bad. And this Oregon offense they finally got a little bit more creative at times, but Justin Herbert is locked in on his best receiver, and that's basically all they're doing in the passing game is Herbert to Dylan Mitchell, and there's still a good amount of stubbornness to the offense. Nothing is easy. Receivers just are not open in this Oregon offense, which is very strange to say. The running game is still, going straight at the teeth of the defense. It's almost like, there's like some singer-songwriters, Ty, who have that long preamble before a song. Well, you're Bruce Springsteen types. You're like, first wrote this song when I was talking to my pappy, and then he was talking to his pappy, and it's just about it. Almost like when Oregon lines up in the pistol and Justin Herbert stands there, which for what feels like 4 seconds with the ball held out for the running back. It's like, well, we're going to run this straight at your defensive tackle.
Isn't it great when they do that sort of delay on 4th and short too?
Oh my God.
That's the best.
There is something still incredibly stubborn about this Oregon offense, and whatever. A win is a win. Win your clunkers, and they did, but Oregon could lose to Oregon State. That's just where we are right now. So there is your Prius demolition derby rundown of the week.
I appreciate that. Let's go over to the Big Ten. I want to talk about Ohio State 36, Nebraska 31. So this was a 1-score game in the fourth quarter. And I hope folks out there took our advice and went with Nebraska plus 17 on their pick'em pools or their completely legal or illegal bets that might be out there. I I liked what I saw from J.K. Dobbins on the ground. That was encouraging.
And Weber, and
both
Weber,
really
sure.
Good. But Dobbins especially had a season high in rushing yardage, 3 touchdowns on the ground. I also like the defense is a work in progress, and Urban Meyer has acknowledged as much. But I like that they didn't give up any big hitters, big long touchdowns on defense. Yeah. That's quietly an improvement for this defense because they've given up something like 400 yards in 5 straight games. It's not the same defense without Nick Bosa. And I think you'll take the improvement or any sign of progression wherever you can get it because it has been a bit of a struggle for them defensively.
Yeah, some sloppiness, an undisciplined stretch or two from Ohio State on defense against Nebraska. I think more of the credit needs to go to Adrian Martinez and his progression and comfort, going to the horseshoe and making plays, I thought is a good sign of things to come for Nebraska, who certainly do not look like the Nebraska team we saw for much of September and early October. So that's at least encouraging. And yes, Ohio State, they get better on the ground, which is important because they are just flat beatable if they can't move the ball with J.K. Dobbins and Weber. It's unacceptable. And I thought Dwayne Haskins was pretty good. Didn't fully look like himself. Adrian Martinez, I thought, in terms of playmaking, may have been in a better place. But again, win your clunkers. And Ohio State had a little clunk to them, but I saw more rhythm from Ohio State, which is an encouraging sign with Michigan on a collision course.
The best game of the day among Big Ten opponents may have been Purdue and Iowa. Purdue wins 38-36.
Purdue!
A 25-yard field goal from Purdue with 8 seconds left gave them a big home win here over a ranked Iowa team. Iowa's defense let them down in this one. They've been good for most of the year, but Purdue had just too many big plays. Iowa couldn't get a late stop when they needed it here, which is ultimately how Purdue ended up winning. I can't say enough good about what the Boilermakers are doing this season.
Yeah, Terry Wright steps up as a big playmaker for David Blau, who was great in this game. A couple mistakes, but I really like watching Purdue against an Iowa defense. Has had a good amount of success this year. Granted, maybe not against the best teams on their schedule, but Blau is good, and it is kind of a bummer that Jeff Brom started what appears to be the wrong guy. Maybe there are circumstances that we don't know about, but Blau is the guy, and he is performing. Nate Stanley, the line looks pretty good in the end, but I thought he had a pretty inconsistent day, which Iowa just can never fully afford because they don't really have too many answers. I like Mekhi Sargent, but Iowa not being able to control the clock, not being able to control Purdue's defensive front, which you should be able to do to some extent, is just going to hurt the Hawkeyes and what they're built around. And good for them for being in this game and being in a position to win this game with a strong fourth quarter. But I think you tip your hat to Purdue, who, if they're not in the driver's seat to win the West because of Northwestern, but they finish with beatable Minnesota, a Wisconsin team without Alex Hornibrook for the foreseeable future, and going to Indiana. This should be an 8-4 Purdue team to me.
Elsewhere in the Big Ten, we had Michigan State 24, Maryland 3. If you thought that Maryland was at all a good bet after all the turmoil this week, you were sorely mistaken. Maryland had 100 total yards in this game. They lose 24-3 to Michigan State. We talked about Wisconsin. They win by 14 over Rutgers. Big game for Jonathan Taylor, tailback, who had 3 touchdowns and 208 yards on the ground. Decent game, though, for our boy King Arthur Sitkowski for Rutgers.
Yeah, he was better. He was better. I watched extended highlights. Yeah, I mean, not throwing interceptions that's an improvement. Wisconsin's in a weird place, though. Yeah, I don't love the Badgers moving forward. I love Jonathan Taylor, tailback, but this is the gap year for Wisconsin.
And finally, Illinois 55. Minnesota 31. Listen. I don't want to spend too much time on this game.
Let's spend the rest of our time on this game.
But this was one of those toilet snake games, wasn't it?
I guess. I don't know. I don't know what reasonable expectation of
Illinois
privacy that Minnesota 24. Had. Listen, Ty.
Listen.
We are a Reggie Corbin appreciation segment of a podcast. That's what we're in right now.
Sure.
Let's just focus on the Illinois. gets things going on offense. I know they fired their defensive coordinator before this game, but the drive for 6 continues, Ty.
They've got Nebraska, Iowa, and Northwestern left.
Okay.
And they have 4 wins. They have 4 wins right now, so they need to win 2 of those 3.
What is a group of snakes called? Do we know?
I will look that up.
Because that needs to occur in the toilets of the rest of their schedule. Group of snakes is called, is it a nightmare?
A coil.
A coil. It's a nightmare to me. It could be called a knot, a den, a pit, a nest, a bed.
I like the snake pit.
Okay, so we need a snake pit in the toilet situation for Illinois moving forward.
Yeah. There
Hey, good for the Illini. ILL.
All right, where do we want to go next? Let's go to the SEC.
Okay.
We teased the game from Felipe Franks, just 9 of 22 passing.
Mm-hmm.
Missouri destroyed Florida, Dan. It was 38-17. Speaking of toilet snakes, this one got Florida in the butt, and it wasn't close. Drew Lock picked them apart. 250, 3 touchdowns through the air. Mizzou ran for 221 on the ground. I would say an all-around lousy effort, not just by the Florida defense, but also by the Florida offense. Felipe Franks, not good. Neither LaMichael Pirine nor Jordan Scarlett had much going on the ground, though Florida did play from behind for most of this game. How much of this did you watch? And I need a minute-by-minute recounting of Richard Johnson's reaction to it.
He is resigned to what this Florida offensive season is going to look like. I didn't watch a ton of this game. I watched some of it this morning. Offensively, this is just, I mean, we talked about, with previous good performances from whoever, the alley-oop situation. Florida's defense could only keep it going for so long, which was not that long, mind you, because of how quickly and how poorly Florida's offense attacked Missouri, and which is to say, not all that much.
Not well.
And it showed with up front Florida just not being able to stop Missouri on the ground. They were just on the field a ton, and it was cool to see Drew Lock and Mizzou finally get something going against an SEC team on offense. But I think the story is more here. Florida having to probably go back to square one. I don't know who the answer is at quarterback. It doesn't look to be Felipe Franks. I can't imagine too many people are excited about Kyle Trask and his ceiling for the Gators. So it's a back to the drawing board type week for Florida, and an encouraging sign for Mizzou.
Mizzou looks like they're going to finish 8-4. They've got Vandy, Tennessee, and Arkansas left. It'd be a nice year for them.
Yep.
Florida has South Carolina, Idaho, and Florida State left on the schedule.
Muschamp Bowl.
Yeah, they're 6-3. So I think worst case, you're looking 8-4 for Florida. Maybe 9-3. Maybe 9-3.
We'll see.
Auburn 24. Texas A&M 24. Jared Stidham, a late touchdown pass with 1:41 left to Seth Williams. That gives Auburn the come-from-behind victory to get them number 6 on the season. Still concerned that Auburn can't run. It's week 10. They still can't run, but this was a nice win for them in come-from-behind fashion.
I would say they've been running better with Boobie Whitlow these past few weeks, but
not yesterday.
No, I know, but I don't think they tried all that much. At a certain point, they realized it, and that's at least credit to you see something not working, you're not running into the same wall over and over again. Jarrett Stidham did a nice job rallying them back. They were down, it felt like for a while, 24-14, and he does a good job spreading the ball around. Felt like, especially given the concerns about this Auburn offensive line, felt like he had a ton of time. A&M just did a pretty remarkably bad job of getting after the quarterback. The edge rushers just seemed like they were not in the picture at all. There was some really nice, efficient drives from Auburn, spreading the ball around through the air. So really good resolve, I would say, from the Tigers. Derek Brown was incredible up front for them. Kellen Mond was a rough watch. That was a rough watch for Texas A&M on offense. Travion Williams did a lot more positive than not, but they, especially you look at the background of this Texas A&M coaching staff and the development at quarterback that Jimbo Fisher has led quarterbacks to, Kellen Mond is regressing.
Yeah.
Just a clunker from A&M from basically halftime on.
Okay. South Carolina 48, Ole Miss 44. More offense than you're probably used to if you're a South Carolina fan. 510 total yards.
Mm-hmm.
Really nice game through the air for Jake Bentley. This has been the deal when you play Ole Miss pretty much week in and week out. Got to score. Got to score to beat them. Not going to offer much resistance on the defensive side of the football, but got to bring your scoring shoes if you want to win. And South Carolina did. They win by 4. Bit of a shootout.
Yeah, good for South Carolina. Nice day for Jake Bentley. There's only so much you can do as a one-dimensional Ole Miss team, and that reared its ugly head. I don't know if you saw the Brian Edwards one-handed catch.
Oh, amazing.
That was
amazing.
Stupid amazing. Yeah. So, yeah, South Carolina made plays, suffered, a lot of injuries in this one. Rico Dowdle, I think he only had a carry, so good for South Carolina for having the options to step in and for holding on and coming back and taking this.
Elsewhere in the SEC, just to round it out, Mississippi State wins by 42 over La Tech, 45-3, and Tennessee wins. Low-scoring affair over
Not great.
Charlotte, 14-3, but a win nonetheless.
Yes, and yeah, Nick Fitzgerald, he threw the ball well against, granted, Louisiana Tech, but you know what? Louisiana Tech's all right. They're a pretty good Conference USA team, sure.
All right, Big 12, Baylor 35, Oklahoma State 31, Dan.
Yes, comeback city.
It got lost in the shuffle on Wednesday because we did a 90-minute show on all the other games going on, and this one was lower profile. But man, you want to talk about a letdown look-ahead sandwich.
Look at that sandwich. I'm so hungry. I'm so hungry.
Oh,
Hungry.
boy.
They had the big home win a week ago over Texas. Now they're on the road at Baylor, and they've got Bedlam on deck. That's
on the road.
That's a letdown look-ahead sandwich if I've ever seen one. I take responsibility for not calling it out. I should have called it out, but Baylor does win 35-31 here in upset fashion.
Yeah, Charlie Brewer comes back, I think, at the very end of the third quarter. Jalen McClendon, the NC State transfer, I believe, he starts and is unexceptional. They get enough on the ground, a couple big plays Baylor does to stay in this game. And Oklahoma State wasn't terrible on offense. They just didn't do enough to separate themselves. And a last-second Charlie Brewer throw, wins it. And, Baylor has a winning record. That's a thing.
TCU 14, K-State 13. Do you want to say anything about this game? Do you have anything that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I would like to add, I did not watch this game.
Me neither.
I didn't watch any of it this morning. I didn't watch chunks of it after the fact, and I have no plans on doing any more than that because this game has no bearing on much beyond who Kansas State will probably hire, and maybe as it relates to the Oregon defensive staff, if and when they make a coaching change.
And finally, Iowa State 27, Kansas 3.
I know it's Kansas, and they're going to move on from David Beatty, I'm sure. But Purdy like a Brock starts high.
Oh, baby.
The train keeps on rolling, and you worry about, I know Kyle Kempt was in there for a little bit, but this quarterback room could look very thin very soon. I know Kyle Kempt, it's his final season, but you have a freshman come in and dominate like Brock Purdy has for good stretches of this season. That's going to reflect. So hopefully Iowa State and Matt Campbell are able to weather anything that happens. But Iowa State, damn, love it.
And finally, let's close out with the ACC. Let's go back in time if we can for a hot minute. Pitt 23. UVA 13. The ACC Coastal, Dan, getting a little postal right now. Pitt Panthers are 5-4.
In control.
They have sole possession of first place in the Coastal/Postal division.
Mm-hmm.
And they've got Virginia Tech, Wake, and Miami on the schedule the last 3 weeks. All of those games are very winnable.
Oh, yeah.
A mega effort by Darren Hall for Pitt, who ran for 229 and 3 touchdowns. Secondly, a huge effort to hold down Bryce Perkins by that Pitt defense, which did a really nice job in this game. They win 23-13.
Yeah, soggy night in Charlottesville, but Pitt able to get it moving on the ground, hold on, a really nice day defensively, which is not something you can say about Pitt super often.
Nope.
So Pitt at 4-1. Collision course with Clemson. Everybody was saying it before the season. Just wait until Pitt and Clemson square off in Charlotte.
You know it.
That's when can we pivot and shift to something that is just, I don't want to say confounding,
okay,
because that would mean that there isn't an explanation. Miami got bad.
Miami got real bad real quick. You could say Mark Richt has lost full control of Miami.
It sucks because they're wasting a lot of defensive talent. There's only so much you can do when Mark Richt is rotating in quarterback after quarterback who can't do much. And I thought Miami was actually pretty good in the first half. They were able to push Duke's defense around, but as has been the story. We'll go with that grammar. As has been the story in previous weeks, Miami just looked incredibly flat in the second half. Another very soggy, dare I say, moist game here down in South Florida. But Miami looks listless. I saw a stat somewhere. I think they're 2-7 in their last 9 games versus Power 5 teams. There's talent on this roster.
Yeah.
There is less talent on this sideline and in this Miami booth. I don't know what's going on with this Canes team.
They have lost 3 straight after beating Florida State a couple weeks ago. And right now they're at 5-4. 5-4. They go to Georgia Tech, to Virginia Tech, and they host Pitt to close out the year, which means they need to get one of those 3 to get bowl eligible. Now, I think they'll get one of them, but I don't think it's a given, not with the current state of affairs right now.
Yeah, we might see an offensive overhaul. And I don't know if it's looking at JC quarterbacks. I don't know what it's looking like because I don't really have that many problems with their defense. But the alley-oop situation in Miami is tenable or untenable, really.
Yeah. 20-12 was your final score as Duke knocks them off. Let's talk about Clemson. Clemson wins 77-16 over Louisville. Travis Etienne had 153 yards and a touchdown on just 8 carries, which is a really good average if you're doing the math at home. In case you are wondering, Dan, there are only 7 teams worse than Louisville in yards per play allowed on defense. Suffice to say, the Brian Van Gorder experiment is not going well in Louisville, nor is the Bobby Petrino experiment at large. They may be passing the hat around here very shortly to make a coaching change and hopefully lure Jeff Brom back to his alma mater.
You say Brian Van Gorder has been an issue. I say Bobby Petrino had one of those heist movie montages where he's assembling his crew to make one last big hit. And he just shows up at Brian Van Gorder's house. He's like, I've got a plan. Right. And if we execute it right, we're all going to walk away millionaires.
Well, see, usually the way it works, he would never just show up at BVG's house.
Sure.
He would first invite BVG to a dilapidated warehouse where BVG would have no reason to know why he's going there.
I brought all of you here because you're the best. On a more positive note, 10 different Clemson Tigers scored touchdowns on 11 total touchdowns. That includes Dabo Swinney's kid.
Yeah.
That includes basically everybody on the roster. You score 77 points. You're spreading the love around, and Louisville remains putrid.
Clemson goes on the road next week to play Boston College.
Tricky.
It is tricky. Boston College.
Is it the red bandana game?
I believe so, yeah.
Game day's going? Yeah.
Boston College 31, Virginia Tech 21. The biggest news to come out of this game was A.J. Dillon, the star running back for Boston College, re-aggravating his ankle injury. That is significant because we know Boston College wants to run the football and play defense. And if they don't have Dillon for next week against Clemson, it certainly changes the dynamic a bit. We'll have to wait and see. We can update everyone on Wednesday when we do the podcast. But nonetheless, Boston College 7-2. A very good season for them. Virginia Tech in the process of trying to rebuild, figure things out moving forward. But I think the big story here is that Dillon injury and how it might affect what we're going to see next week against Clemson.
And good for BC for being patient with Steve Adazio. And, we're not looking at an ACC that Boston College is somehow beating all of these great teams. We're looking at a very solid BC team that is taking advantage, like pretty good, impressive teams do, of some down opponents, beating Miami, beating Virginia Tech, beating Louisville. I know they lose to NC State and, Purdue is not great and they're not in the ACC, but beating a Wake team, just they're doing what pretty good teams do, and good for BC for weathering the storm.
Speaking of teams in the ACC that are 7-2, maybe that we didn't see coming, how about Syracuse?
How about them?
Syracuse was down 10-0 early. Then they rip off 28 unanswered points. They take control of this road game at Wake Forest. Full disclosure, remember how I talked about the look-ahead factor here with Notre Dame on deck?
Yep.
I got my dates mixed up. Syracuse does not play Notre Dame for 2 weeks, which means no look ahead. Certainly no look ahead with Louisville on deck next week for Cuse.
Probably so not. Where's that game, though?
Does it matter?
Syracuse, I don't think the Orange have won a road game before yesterday in the ACC since 2016. So there's still some non-Carrier Dome yips to overcome.
If they lose on the road or wherever to Louisville next week, I think I have to dress up like a Cardinal.
Okay, well, the game's in the Carrier Dome, so we're fine.
Or something at our next live show. I just don't see that happening with the way that Syracuse is playing right now.
So you're going to dress up like a giant red bird if Syracuse loses to Louisville. Okay, fair enough.
And I say that knowing full well that I'm not going to edit this out.
I know. The Orange got it done on the ground, which is definitely new. The defense was pretty good. And I actually do like Wake's offense. We saw the big game from Matt Colburn last week against Louisville, and Sam Hartman made plays. But yeah, Syracuse is a team that just has their act together.
They do. All right. Georgia Tech knocked off North Carolina 38-28. And finally in the ACC, we had NC State 47, Florida State 28. NC State gets off the schneid. They had lost 2 straight. And I thought this one would be closer. I think we both did.
Yeah.
I witnessed this one through the lens of our good friend Bud Elliott, who you mentioned earlier. His Twitter feed read a lot like my Twitter feed during a Notre Dame game that's going south. He just had nothing nice to say about the Florida State linebacker core and noted how NC State was essentially picking that unit apart in this game to score their 47 points. Florida State now on the road next week at Notre Dame. They also have Boston College and Florida remaining on their schedule. It would not be unforeseen for them to finish at 4-8 this year.
No, and I don't think it would be after the first couple of weeks all that surprising given where this line is. They couldn't get anything going for Cam Akers and Jacquez Patrick on the ground. James Blackman steps in and starts in place of DeAndre Francois, who I don't know if I saw a specific injury, just that he was beat up after the Clemson game. And James Blackman was largely fine, but it's just when you ask an offense to be as one-dimensional as Florida State's looks, it's tough against at least a decent team. Ryan Finley, as you mentioned, did a good job picking apart the Florida State defense, who was on the field way too much, and a nice step forward for Reggie Gillespie, who NC State has struggled on the ground even when winning, and so I don't know if Florida State's the cure for the common run game, but a nice day from the Wolfpack there.
Yeah.
By the way, I want to just a quick applause. You glossed over it, and that's fine because it's Georgia Tech, North Carolina. It's Georgia Tech winning with their backup quarterback once again with Tobias Oliver. Taquan Marshall still not. I know he played a little bit, but not throwing passes as he gets healthier. And Nate Woody and that Georgia Tech defense. How many times do we see them keep teams under 30? And they've done it multiple times now. So maybe Georgia Tech's defense coming somewhere near. They keep Virginia Tech under 30. They keep Duke under 30. This is a Yellow Jacket team that's at least slight upward trajectory.
Indeed.
Yeah.
What else do we have?
So you mentioned UCF Temple.
We had, UCF.
Hell of a game.
52, Temple 40. A lot of points. UCF takes control of that game in the second half. We already talked about Colgate and their domination over Fordham. We had a big win by Tulane over USF, I believe.
Yep. Really nice day as the Green Wave improve.
What else stood out to you?
NIU, very quietly because of their particularly rough non-conference schedule, which was, I want to say, Iowa, Utah, Florida State. They have not lost in conference play. So that is, yes, collision course with Buffalo, who we mentioned as having a couple dudes on their offense. Middle Tennessee quietly playing well. They take down a disaster of a Western Kentucky program with your guy, Mike Sanford, right?
Yeah.
That's a tough situation for the Hilltoppers. UAB is not only is UAB really, really good, not only are they a really, really good story, they take down whoever. I think they just murdered, I want to say it was UTSA. I'll verify that. But they have Texas A&M in College Station in a couple weeks. I'm not saying UAB's beating Texas A&M on the road.
Listen.
But I'm saying keep your ears and eyes open.
Okay.
Because UAB, and I really like their running back, Spencer Brown, a good deal. They're pretty dangerous. Fresno State has held their last 4 of 5 opponents under 10 points in the Mountain West. And of those 4 opponents, 3 of the 4 of them have not scored a touchdown. They've only allowed 3 points. I don't know what Jeff Tedford's future is. I just know the job he's done at Fresno State should get him a second chance.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's in the Pac-12. I don't know if it's at a bigger program elsewhere. Whatever opens up eventually in the Pac-12, whether it's USC, whether it's Colorado, there should be a long look at Jeff Tedford and what he's doing with his second act at Fresno State. They're on a collision course with Utah State, who has been outstanding this year. They go to Hawaii, which is never the easiest thing to go that far and dominate, and the Aggies do it. San Diego State quietly having a nice season. Boise State, is I think on at the end of Utah State's schedule, so not necessarily a collision course, but certainly something worth watching. Elsewhere, FAU finally gets an impressive win. FIU has been pretty good, so good for the Lane Train for pulling out of the station. We briefly mentioned Houston losing, but they lose and give up a ton to SMU. A really nice day for Ben Hicks and the Mustangs and Sonny Dykes in his first year. They now have a winning record in the AAC. App State keeps it going. I don't know how much left there is to talk about. Troy has not lost in conference. They comfortably-ish beat Louisiana Lafayette, and Navy is having itself a disaster of a year.
It's been a very bad year for Navy.
It has been, and I know our pal Andy Staples wrote about the possibility of Ken Niumatalolo getting the Maryland job, which still makes good sense to me. Maybe they're going after the Hung Service Academy guy.
You guys, and this freaking option.
What are you going to do at Maryland to do anything more than going to like the Motor City Bowl?
That's a fair point. My counterpoint is, when has the option worked at a post-Nebraska Power 5 school?
I'm going to send you a Georgia Tech Orange Bowl champion shirt. How about that?
Okay, that's one
I'm
instance.
I'm going to find it.
That's one instance. I want more.
That's
Give me
fine.
More.
And you know what? Maryland doesn't need to go to a New Year's Day Bowl.
I mean, Kansas made the Orange Bowl too, so...
Yeah, well, Kansas just had a horrible human at coach. That was not anything to do with system that they were running. But Cincinnati, a nice day for Luke Fickell. And the Bearcats, the offense hasn't always been super consistent, but defensively they've been lights out all season long, and good for them. Crazy one, UMass over Liberty in overtime. I think it was 60-something to 50-something, so I always like that entertainment factor. Arkansas State, I don't really mention for any real reason beyond they put up 391 yards on Alabama. LSU did not.
No.
So that's about, I mean, Memphis had a really nice day offensively against ECU. Brady White and I think it's DeMonte Coxey. And on the ground, they're really good too. Army gets by Air Force in a tricky spot. Army is full on good. And I know, again, you're anti-option because you hate creativity and fun, but Monken's done a really nice job for Army.
Listen, did you see Army's opening drive in that game? 20 plays, 89 yards, and they took 12 minutes and 55 seconds off the clock and scored a touchdown.
Army on November 17th at noon Eastern on the CBS Sports Network, national television, gets a chance to at least pound a tiny dent in America's team, the Colgate Raiders.
That's right.
Army Colgate. I am not saying this with any degree of irony or sarcasm. I am watching the hell out of that game on one of my TVs.
Give us a call, CBS. We'll commentate it.
We'll do a game day.
Yeah.
A very small, minimally produced game day.
That's right.
At Army Colgate. It's not all that far from us.
No, we could do it.
It's in the Hudson Valley. It's fine.
We could do it.
I think they have Lafayette the week before Army does, because they're in the Pat League for basketball, I want to say. So that's all a roundabout way of saying, hell yeah, Army Colgate collision course. Beyond that, I don't think I have much to add. I have dudes.
Let's do some dudes here, Dan.
Yeah.
Let's hear it.
Easy. Quinnen Williams, one of the simplest dudes I've ever had the opportunity of reciting name-wise. DeAndre Swift, N'Keal Harry. It's time to retire N'Keal Harry. It just is.
Yeah.
He is our TRL retiree of the day. Trey Sermon does fantastic work for Oklahoma on the ground. Josh Uche from Michigan was all over Penn State. I think you've probably heard that name if you are a Penn State fan in the last 24 hours. Dana Holgerson, Holgo, with enormous brass heartbeats, taking down Texas. Khalil Tate with a very nice game against Colorado. Darren Hall of Pitt just destroying Virginia and their defense. Little Jordan Humphrey made plays in a losing effort. Ian Book. Brian Edwards for South Carolina. When I said his name out loud yesterday, I said Brian Edwards-Helaire because it's more fun to say it like that. Colgate's defense, we mentioned. Greg McCrae for UCF had himself a day. Derek Brown on Auburn's defensive line. And once again, Fresno State's defense just doing work, Ty. And I know I didn't recite a drive, Ty, but that's okay. A drive summary.
Yeah.
Because I saved this for the end because I have a special version that I'd like to do.
Oh, please.
For our friends at LSU.
Let's do it.
Punt, 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 fumble, punt, 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 missed field goal, interception. And that's it. That's it.
That's like the lounge country version, Dan. I like it.
It's not casual. It was just ultimately just chill. Just a chill day for LSU aggression.
There you have it. Week 10, Sow Your Oats Saturday, Snake
Who do we
in the
have next
Toilet
week?
Saturday officially in the books. Let's pull up the schedule for next week just to give you a preview.
I never look until Sunday afternoon.
Absolutely. That would be bad luck. So here is the deal. While we're pulling up the schedule here, installing as much as humanly possible, please do check us out at solidverbal.com. As you're out at these games, please do tell your friends to like the Verbal, to try the Verbal out. It's a free show. You can find everything again at solidverbal.com. Anywhere where you can download a podcast, you can download the show. You can also follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, and check out the subreddit by Verballers for Verballers over at reddit.com/r/solidverbal. We do have a newsletter. People have written in to ask us about the newsletter. And they said, wow, you're not sending it out as much this year as you did last year. Am I missing it? No, you're not missing it. We're trying not to bombard people. When we have something important to say, we promise that we're going to send it out there first. So if you like the show, going out to the website, fill out the form. We will send a newsletter out here, I would imagine, very shortly with some interesting stuff for all y'all. But in the meantime, please do go on out there, check it out, and tell your friends. Now, as for Week 11.
I mean, Auburn, Georgia's clinched, but in terms of high-level football, in terms of playoff stuff, that definitely has some repercussions. Florida State and Notre Dame should not be all that interesting. Ohio State, Michigan State, that is going to be a test for the Buckeyes because that is in East Lansing, and we have ad nauseum talked about Michigan State's offensive struggles. That's still a really good Sparty defense. Texas Tech should be entertaining. I don't know what time that kicks off. It should have an entertainment value that shouldn't be ignored. Northwestern Iowa certainly has Big Ten West repercussions. Oregon, Utah, I think is going to be somewhat ugly. I'm not all that confident in Oregon, but Utah does not have their starting quarterback, so we shall see. Wisconsin, Penn State will be a good bellwether and measuring stick of what two kind of down teams look like. At least that game is I think it's in Happy Valley. West Virginia should take care of business against TCU.
We've got Mississippi State, Alabama. We've got Bedlam, Oklahoma State against Oklahoma. Washington State on the road at Colorado. Could be interesting.
Letdown spot, LSU, Arkansas. I don't know. Fresno State, Boise State it's a bummer that it's at 10:15, but I think good because it won't be competing against much. So somehow, some way, maybe people can see a really good Mountain West game.
And then Clemson at Boston College, the nightcap.
Red bandana, game days in Chestnut Hill.
There you go. Fun one ahead. Start thinking up your names for this coming Saturday. It's going to be Week 11. In the meantime, Dan, fun one this week. Good to talk to you as always. Give us a holler at 408-VERBAL-1. Let us know what your beer suggestions are for the coming Saturday. Don't forget to follow us on social media. And hey, if you've got anything to say that hasn't already been said, we're at solidverbal@gmail.com. For that guy over there, my good friend Dan Rubenstein, for myself, Ty Hildebrand over here in Eastern PA, we will catch you all on Wednesday. In the meantime, stay solid.
Peace.